All right, everybody, welcome back. We are diving into a fascinating topic today, one that I think a lot of you are going to find pretty interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
Global power dynamics.
It's a big one.
It is a big one, and we've got this awesome comparative analysis that you sent over, looking at the U.S. and Pakistan.
Yeah,
And I got to say, going through it, there's so much to unpack here.
absolutely.
But it really kind of lays out just how different the global landscape looks depending on where you're standing.
For sure, and how these two countries, stack up in terms of their influence.
Exactly. So let's start with maybe the most obvious difference, the economies, right?
Right.
The U.S. with a $25 trillion GDP.
It's massive.
It's huge. And then you compare that to Pakistan at $375 billion.
Yeah, that's a huge discrepancy.
That's not even in the same ballpark, is it?
No, not even close. And it's not just about the numbers themselves, right? It's about what that economic power enables.
Okay, so what do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. The U.S., because of its economic strength, it has a huge influence on global financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank.
Oh, right. Yeah, I see what you're saying.
They basically get to set the rules of the game in a lot of ways. Influence lending practices, shape economic policies in other countries.
And Pakistan, they're dealing with their own economic struggles.
Exactly. Inflation, debt, all these internal challenges that kind of limit their options on the global stage.
Yeah, it makes you realize that economic strength really underpins a lot of a country's power, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's the foundation in many ways.
So then that takes us to the next area that kind of blew my mind, the military comparison.
Yeah.
The U.S. spends, what, like $800 billion on defense?
Yeah, it's an astronomical figure.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And they've got all this cutting-edge technology bases all over the world.
It's a truly global military presence.
And really hard to grasp the sheer scale of it.
And you have to think about the strategic implications, right?
What do you mean?
Well, that kind of military power, it gives the U.S. the ability to project force pretty much anywhere in the world.
Yeah, either through direct action or just, the threat of it.
Exactly. And that has a huge impact on foreign policy and how the U.S. approaches global conflicts.
Now, I know Pakistan has a pretty capable military, too.
Oh, definitely. Particularly their nuclear arsenal is significant.
Yeah. But you can't really compare the two in terms of resources, can you?
No. Pakistan's military capabilities are definitely shaped by their own regional context and the resources they have available.
Okay, so we've talked about money and muscle. What about brains?
The technology and innovation game.
Right. And I was fascinated by the comparison here because the U.S. is just so dominant, isn't it?
It is. They've got Silicon Valley, those tech giants like Apple, Google, Microsoft.
Yeah, and they're really leading the charge in areas like AI and space exploration.
And, technological dominance translates into a lot of other advantages.
Like what?
Well, economic strength, for one.
Right.
Also, military capabilities, even a cultural influence.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Pakistan, they're doing some really interesting things in their own developing tech sector.
Yeah, I was reading about some of the startups there. It's pretty cool.
It is, but there's still a pretty big gap to bridge.
So let's talk geopolitics for a minute.
Okay, the big chessboard.
Right. And from these sources, it seems like the U.S. is really calling a lot of the shots on the world stage.
Yeah, in part because of those strong alliances they have.
Like NATO.
Exactly. And of course, their permanent seat on the UN Security Council.
Oh, yeah. That's huge, isn't it?
Huge. It basically gives them veto power over any UN resolution.
So they can block anything they don't like.
Pretty much. And that gives them a massive say in matters of international peace and security.
Pakistan, they have influence, but it's more regional, right?
Right. They're a major player in South Asia and Islamic world, but their reach on the global stage is more limited.
Okay, so last thing I wanted to touch on, education and research.
Yeah, the foundation for a lot of things.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
The U.S. has these world-class universities and research institutions that are really the envy of the world.
Yeah, they attract top talent from all over, and that really contributes to a highly skilled workforce.
And drives innovation, which keeps the economy strong.
It's a virtuous cycle.
So how does Pakistan compare in that area?
Well, they are investing in education. They recognize its importance, but they're facing some challenges.
Like what?
Well, literacy rates are still a concern, and funding for research is limited.
Okay, so to sum it all up, it's pretty clear from this deep dive that the U.S. and Pakistan, they operate on very different levels of power.
Absolutely. The U.S. has a clear advantage in most of the areas we discussed.
You know what I'm really curious about now is how this all plays out in the future.
Yeah, it's a dynamic landscape. Things are constantly shifting.
Exactly. So what do you think? What are some of the key factors we should be watching for?
Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is that even though the U.S. has all this power, international relations are complex.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Pakistan's strategic location, for example.
Right. They're right in the middle of a lot of key regions.
Exactly. And their relationships with other countries in the region, their military capabilities, these all make them a player.
A player that other countries have to take seriously.
Absolutely. So it's not just about looking at who has the most money or the biggest military.
It's about all these other factors that come into play.
Exactly. The soft power, the regional dynamics, the strategic partnerships.
And how all of that interacts on the global stage.
Precisely.
Wow. Well, that is a lot to think about.
It is, but it's important to keep in mind the nuances of power. It's not always as straightforward as it seems.
And the future of global power dynamics. It's not predetermined, is it?
Not at all. I think we're going to see some really interesting shifts and changes in the years to come.
Yeah. I'm kind of excited to see how it all unfolds.
Me too. It's going to be fascinating.
Well, everyone, thanks for joining us for this deep dive into U.S. and Pakistan power dynamics.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope this has given you some food for thought as you continue to explore these issues.
Absolutely. Keep learning, keep questioning.
And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Sounds good.